I know firsthand just how difficult it can be to make the topic of saving money entertaining, enjoyable to think about, how difficult it might be to discuss in some circumstances, and how difficult it might be to actually put in motion. However, I recently read a book which has a section within that captures what saving money is all about perfectly, and I really like how it was presented, and that's what I'm going to be discussing today. Let's dive in. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Reese, and in today's video, I wanted to talk about saving in general and practices that I believe are worth adopting, which will help improve our lifestyles, our careers, and potentially our income. I think this book is going to make it into my top 5 for the year of 2021. It's called The Psychology of Money, and it's written by Morgan Housel. I probably should have looked up how to pronounce that last name. The chapter that I'm going to be touching on today is titled Room for Error, and it creates the argument that you cannot see the events of the future and therefore cannot prepare for what you cannot envision. And what can stem from this, if you are someone who cares enough to worry about uncertainty, is elevated levels of stress, maybe some form of anxiety, and the potential to be in the wrong state of mind when focus is needed to make important decisions. I would say that a wealthy person's biggest fear would be them not being able to maintain that wealth. So not being able to prepare for unforeseen events might be a causal factor for the feelings that someone in a position of wealth might experience. And this is where the discussion comes into place, because although you can't specifically prepare for unforeseen events, you can absolutely take steps and put processes in place right now to avoid major financial or potentially crippling losses when an event happens that you might not be prepared for. And this will become increasingly more important as you grow older, you develop throughout your career, you build your wealth, and potentially build a family. And just quickly, before I go into more depth on what these steps are, I just wanted to mention I've left a link to the book in the description down below in case you wanted to pick up a copy for yourself. Like I said, it's going to make it into my top 5. I really enjoyed the read, and I think you might too if this is the type of book that you're into reading. While you're down there, please do me a massive favor as well and tap that like and subscribe button. It really does help the channel grow, and I really appreciate the support. So with that out of the way, let's look at what can be done in the background passively of your everyday life to prepare for these unforeseen events that you probably are more than likely to experience at some point throughout your time on this earth. Firstly, while you may not be able to prepare for an individual event, you can absolutely avoid single points of failure. A single point of failure in simple terms for finance would be a single issue or problem that could lead to the demise of your income systems by shutting down its source of revenue. And a very good example of this would be relying on a paycheck to fund short-term spending needs without having an emergency fund or safety net. If you were to lose your job tomorrow, not having an emergency fund or a safety net until you find a new job or new employment would absolutely add to your probably already high stress levels. Now, by no means is this video about how to build an emergency fund or a safety net. I'm simply trying to outline the easiest way you could go about avoiding this single point of failure. For example, looking for employment while having a safety net will definitely keep those stress levels down, and it will give you more options to take the time to find the right employment, potentially depending on how big your emergency fund is. On the contrary, if you were interested in learning more about why it's important to build an emergency fund and how you could go about doing it, I have left links in the description down below on videos that I have made talking about those topics. So feel free to check them out if you're interested. I think they are useful, especially to people who aren't really sure about how to go about doing this. Moving back to single points of failure for a second here, to expand on this, the activity that you probably should do at some point throughout your life, if not once per year, is try to identify common ones that are going to be present every single day, depending on what you do for a job, depending on what your lifestyle is like, depending on the people that depend on your sources of income to fund their lifestyles. You really should try and identify these single points of failure. That's step number 1, and it's probably one of the most important things you can do, because if you can put processes in place now to build a safety net, to have a buffer in case something goes wrong, it's absolutely wise to start with the activity of identifying what those single points of failure are. And then from here, look for ways to implement redundancy and to make them no longer single points of failure. That's number 1 on my list today, and I think it is a very important one to understand, a very important one to consider, and definitely one to action if you have capacity to do so. Now, the next one is a short one, but a very important one, and you can do this in the background of your day-to-day life passively, and that is to diversify. Over the course of a career, you will earn a lot of money. The old saying, don't put all of your eggs in one basket, holds up nicely here. It's almost building on the single point of failure earlier point I've just made. Diversifying your assets and wealth can be a good way to ensure that you do not lose everything all at once in times of hardship. If you held all of your wealth in a bank account as cash, you would be subjecting yourself to some pretty serious risk. Imagine if that bank went broke. You would be feeling the pressure pretty quickly. Investing your money across a broad range of asset classes will not only reduce your exposure to single points of failure, but will potentially also make you money in the long run. Again, like I said in my first point, I've made videos talking about these topics, about the different types of asset classes you can invest in and how I think you should potentially invest in them, although they're not financial advice. I need to stick that in there as a disclaimer. I think they are interesting topics and ones that I've discussed well in previous videos. So I've left links to them in the description down below. If you were interested in listening to them, watching them, however you consume this content, feel free to check them out as well. The next thing you can do is to get educated on topics of finance. Financial literacy is an incredibly valuable thing to understand. Even having a basic understanding will give you everything you need to increase your ability to effectively budget, save money, reduce your tax, and to overall make good decisions with your money. The way I started learning about finance was mainly through 3 methods. The first method being asking questions to people who have more knowledge on topics that I don't have. And I kind of just went in gung-ho. I would find people that would have knowledge about these topics and I would just ask questions galore. Generally, people are pretty interested in helping you, especially if they feel superior or if they feel like they know something that you might not, and they can see value in teaching you because you seem interested in the topic. It's actually a really easy way to get information, and obviously it's not the gospel way. Some people get information wrong from time to time, including myself, but it's absolutely a good way to have a discussion and start getting ideas about how to approach these topics. Number 2 is to read, and this can be consumed in many different ways, whether it be online through forums like Reddit or maybe articles in books. There is a wealth of knowledge out there, and the best thing about being able to read is that you can consume this knowledge at your own pace to make it a little bit less overwhelming. And number 3 is literally YouTube. I have been subscribed to about 5 financial channels for a few years now who I watch pretty religiously. Every now and then they talk about relevant world topics which might be relevant to how I am managing my own finances, and this keeps me up to speed with what is happening in the world based on these trending topics. They also refresh common rules and processes which I have personally incorporated into my own financial routine and how I manage my own money. It can be a real boost to my motivation and work ethic as to how I manage my finances when these things are repeated and I hear them often enough that it gives me that little bit of extra motivation to maybe update my spreadsheet or go out and look for a better rate on my home loan, whatever it may be. They definitely cover topics which are relevant, and the repetition just kind of ingrains it into my mind and it just becomes a way of life. Might I also mention that this content is free and accessible from my phone from anywhere in the world at any time. It is a wealth of knowledge and something that will allow you to consume large amounts of content very quickly to understand topics that might be complicated or might be something that you need to understand a little bit better. Highly recommend using these 3 methods even if you're someone who is pretty experienced with finance, and you probably are someone who is doing it right now where you're watching a YouTube video trying to learn a bit more about this topic. Highly recommend doing and incorporating some of this into your routine, because reading and watching YouTube videos and learning from people who have this knowledge is an invaluable way to learn about finance. And finally, last up on my list today is one that I believe anyone who has the capacity to do this should do it, and that is to save for no other reason than to save. It is absolutely fine to save for things like potentially a new car, a computer, maybe a new phone, but it is equally, or if not more important, to save for things that you cannot predict. This will help you build a healthy relationship with money. It will also teach you the value of money, and overall, it will put you in a better position than you might be in today. I have built really good habits with saving, and you probably would have heard me say this if you've seen any of my other content. I say it often because it is something that a lot of people have capacity to do, even if it's only in small amounts, and it's something that will reduce stress and uncertainty in your life the sooner you start doing it. It took time to build my saving habits. I have had hiccups, I've had unforeseen expenses, and I have made some very expensive mistakes. However, I was prepared for the fallout of them because of the fundamentals I've put in place of how I manage my money. And this is how I want to put this practice. It is not a get rich quick method. It is an avoid getting poor quick method. One last quick plug before I wrap up the video. If you were interested to see how I break up my paycheck and how I break up my wage, I have linked the the video to how I do that in the description below as well. There is an abundance of resources there which will teach you how to incorporate some of these things into your own life for free. All you have to do is click on them and give them a watch. So if you were interested, the link is down below. So just as a recap, the main things you can do right now to prepare for uncertain times is to avoid single points of failure, to diversify, to educate yourself on financial topics, and the most important in my opinion is to save just because. All of these things will help you build a healthy relationship with money and will help you in the long run in lots of different ways. Finance is always going to be a part of your life. Finance is going to be one of the most consistent things throughout your life. Why not be in the best position possible to handle and tackle all of the challenges they will throw at you? I truly do encourage you to implement some of these practices into your life because they have served me well, and I'm sure there will be elements contained within each of them that will serve you well along your financial journey throughout your life. Overall, I hope that today was insightful. I hope that I offered some way or approach that you could take to bettering your financial position and basically learning and educating yourself on financial topics. Hopefully it was helpful. If it was, please like and subscribe down below. Don't forget to turn on bell notifications so you don't miss any of the videos I release or bring out. And as always, I will leave you there. Have a good day, have a good week, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.